This is rural South Africa, and like the rest of the country, it harbors a dark secret. In spite of having one of the most liberal constitutions in the world, and in spite of being renowned for empowering previously disadvantaged groups, violence against women is rife in South Africa.
As I'm sure you know, over 80% of South Africa's population are church-going.
So why then would women still be at risk? Could it be that society does not reflect the values taught by the church? And if that is true, what role can the church play to help protect the rights of women and to make sure they don't fall prey to abusive partners?
And the church still has a huge amount of sway in terms of people's attitudes and belief systems.
That leaves the church in a predicament. How do they deal with abuse against women? One way is by focusing on men. They need to understand why men abuse, and the best way to do that is to understand men and the issues they face. Bongani is a good example. Today he visits his nephews and nieces as their favorite uncle. Only 3 years earlier, he was devastated after his wife left him. She could not live with his abuse any longer. At that point, Bongani had even tried to take his own life. But what had made him become an abuser?
I
grew up in a good family. It was difficult growing up. It was during the time of apartheid, and there was a lot of violence. This group would be fighting that group. There was always violence around.
It would destroy my life and destroy my family life, you know, because the apartheid, the people, you are fighting, UDF, IFP, you are fighting, and all those things affect me.
Bongani is part of what is known as the lost generation in South Africa. As youths, they fought the apartheid system and came to see violence as a necessary part of life. They often ended up taking the violence from the streets home.
I used to beat up young girls that I grew up with. I only started dating girls when I was older. I was abusive towards everyone while growing up.
We grow up living out what we see. We learn much more from what people around us, especially those we care about and those who are our role models, what they do, more than what they say.
Daniela works for PAXA, a church-based organization that focuses on gender violence. She realizes that one of the most effective ways to deal with violence in the home is to focus on men.
We started the work with men in 2003, after we did some research, particularly looking at the whole question of so-called perpetrators, and beginning to understand that often perpetrators of sexual violence or gender-based violence are often just ordinary men that have got into situations of really intolerable contradictions or suffering or things that they are struggling with that they cannot resolve.
Often in traditional African culture, women have not been seen as equal to men. Cleaning floors would be the work of a woman. The job of a man was to take control of his family.
My father used to drink a lot, and when he was drunk, he was an abusive man. He was abusive towards my mother. It affected us as kids. We saw it as a bad thing. But for me as a young boy, sometimes it looked acceptable. I believed that a woman was something you could beat.
There are cultural practices which are perpetuating gender-based violence.
Lindani is a PAXA facilitator who helps men come to terms with the issues that led them to abuse.
there is this notion of a house that a man is a household head. For you to be a household and to be respected, you are expected to have a job, to have a family. So when you don't have that, in some traditional rural setting, you're regarded as not man enough.
In the past, cultural practices often held societies together. Some of these practices do not translate into a modern society, and women often suffer the brunt in the form of abuse.
For men coming together, it helps them to discuss these issues, especially in terms of deconstructing some of the harmful traditional practices, like the one I've mentioned, and to come up with strategies of how to overcome those, like for instance in church and then in homes and for themselves and their partners.
I'm telling that mostly.
But old habits die hard.
I'm only abused because
when
we were growing up as young boys, until you become a man, you were taught that a man never listened to a woman. That never gets out of your mind. Even now, there are still men who believe that. They still believe that they never have to listen to a woman. Their word is the last.
Bongani has overcome most of his issues by talking about them in the Paxa workshops. Dialogue is a non-violent way of overcoming the cycle of abuse.
Socially, I think in almost any society, men are, as they grow up, they're told they mustn't show their emotions. They are taught to suppress their stuff. And then, of course, it's got to come out somewhere. And very often it comes out in aggression.
Bongani wanted to share his experience with men who face similar issues. He decided to target clinics. Traditionally, clinics have been the domain of women. If he could talk to couples here, he knew he would be able to make a difference.
Their mandate, after we have equipped them, is to go back and help other men to transform their life and also to overcome their difficulties. They are mandated to start men's forums in their own areas. That's what they do. They start men's forums. Men's forums are aimed at building supportive structures for men who are faced with tribulation, so that they can go there and share with other men.
The forums are hugely successful. Often, when men realize their mistake and realize there is an alternative, they break the shackles of the past and embark on a road to healthy relationships built on respect.
Very often one just sort of objectifies men almost as perps and so on, but actually they have their own life story and they have their own struggles and their own wounds that sometimes result in them behaving in ways that in fact they don't find life-giving themselves.
For men who embark on the road of change, the Christian faith offers a special reward.
The Christian faith actually offers something that perhaps other faiths don't offer, in the sense of that notion of being able to say sorry and to accept forgiveness, and that there can be an intervention through the person of Jesus, that you can start completely fresh.
Perhaps that is one way the church can be involved in addressing the issues of gender-based violence. Starting a conversation about why men abuse, addressing the reasons and offering forgiveness can help men change their lives. In turn, our societies become places where women are safe and respected.